And we are COMP397, and it's fall 2015, week 1, lesson 1, part 1, and it's web game programming. So we're starting off today. We're talking about our setup and what this course is all about, right? I'm going to show you the outline, but it's really kind of non-applicable, and we'll talk about that in a second. Let's take a look at that outline that I have. So Professor Falati is she's the program leader on this one. But again, from a prerequisite, you need COMP123. You really do need COMP213, right? And we kind of did those two things. That's because from an interface perspective, you should know your HTML technologies, at least your basic HTML technologies at the get-go, right? So you need those two things. You guys should all have that. That's not a problem. Beyond that, from a scripting perspective, you need to be fairly strong in general with scripting. Now, why COMP123 is a C# scripting course, right? So we won't be doing, obviously, C# here in any way, but that's kind of one of the requirements. Okay, now if you notice, revision date 2014, that's been a while, right? Nothing has really changed. One thing that I do is I don't use the book they recommend, and that's why I got to come up with a little bit of a plan. She recommends something called the Web Game Developers Cookbook. It's not a bad little book that we can use to develop JavaScript and HTML5 games. There's one part that I've taken for that book that I use from a learning perspective, just to learn the way we plan out games from a game planning perspective. That's where we're going to use that one. And there's only one assignment like that. Originally, there's quite a few assignments planned, and it was very aggressive the way the course was planned to go from one API to the next. Like every week you would learn an API, right? That's great from a generalist perspective, but you really never built that in your game at all. Like you'd learn really high level stuff. So I kind of put a kibosh on that one, and I kind of went to one API. And so we're not going to do one API a week. That's just crazy, right? And you'll never learn anything at the end of the day. Like you'll know a little bit of everything, but nothing. You know, you'd be like a jack of all trades, but really don't know how to. Yeah, you've never really done a game at all, right? The whole time, not a complete game. You can't do one in one session. Even the lessons or the assignments won't allow you to do that, right? So some of this stuff I'm showing it to you, but what I need to do is probably by tonight or early next week, I'm going to come up with another plan. It's going to be a course plan or syllabus that I'm going to be using for this course as well. So that way I can share the plan with you, so you know when the assignments are going to be, when the tests are going to be, and all that kind of stuff. Slightly different than what we're doing here. I will have some in-house labs and some stuff that we're going to do in class, and that's a new thing that we're doing this semester compared to last time, only because it'll keep you sharp, right, in terms of using the technology and all that, and prepare you for the test a little bit more, right, because people found that it was a little bit too much. If they don't, and it's not my fault, it's really, they leave it and they think it's easy because they see it, and then they try it, and it's a lot harder than they thought. That's the answer, right? So, and that's the feedback that I got. So again, you can see that this thing was really, really packed. So I'm not going to use it. I'm showing it to you, but I'm not using it. Okay. So I will be producing something a little bit closer. So really, it's a lot closer to this. I've got my setup. I'm probably going to talk boilerplate this week, not next week. And I'll probably give you assignment 1 by week 3, so in a couple weeks, just so that you have a couple things to do. There will be probably a lab next week where I'll ask you to come in, and it'll be an in-house, same-day kind of, it'll be due the same day, something like that. Usually my labs run between 2 and 2.5%, something like that. Final, I'm talking about like you're weighted for the final mark, right? And then you produce something at the end. Okay, so let's get to it, and so I can explain to you where we're going with this thing and what API we're using. So what we're using is, first of all, let's bring this up for a second. So the API that I decided to use is CreateJS. And you might say, why? Why not use Phaser or something else like that? Because there's other game frameworks out there right now that are built out specifically for game. The great thing about CreateJS is it's not necessarily targeted for game. That means you can use it for HTML. You can use it for canvas animation and all this other stuff. In fact, if anything, CreateJS came from the same people that made by Grant Skinner. He came up with this stuff that almost like the the toolkit for CreateJS for Flash. So if you know Flash, or if you knew Flash from before, they use, when you export Adobe Flash into HTML5, the back end is CreateJS, right? So it's a good transition. If you've ever done any work in ActionScript, right, at all, if you've ever touched ActionScript, this you'll find very comfortable. You'll be very at home with CreateJS. It's the same, very similar API to ActionScript, but it's 100% HTML5 compliant, right? So this is good. So it actually releases you, so it actually gives you the ability to create HTML5 games with JavaScript. Now this is a library, a suite of products. It's not just one product. CreateJS is the suite. You have Easel.js, which allows you to do things like movement and animation, set up your game framework, and so on. Tween.js, which allows you to do some animation, tweens, right? In-betweens is where it comes from. So animation is what this is used for. Sound.js, which takes care of HTML5 sound and binds that to our game. Preload.js, which allows us to preload our images and assets, so that way we are very efficient the way we start off our game. And the documentation that's here is quite extensive in terms of the API docs. So they give you some really good examples of how to start things off, and that's what we'll be doing today. We'll do a little demo on how to start this off. Okay, so CreateJS is going to be our API of choice for this semester. Okay, alongside that, because a lot of it's going to be JavaScript heavy, you need to be very comfortable with JavaScript. So how many of you guys are JavaScript gurus? Right? Like you guys are Superman when it comes to JavaScript. I can see it in your eyes, man. I see it, especially the guys who played the squash. You guys are JavaScript kings, right? No? It's okay, because then you will be. But you have to be in order for you to do this course. You have to be in order for you to use Node.js and any kind of advanced JavaScript framework. You need to know JavaScript through and through, right? The great thing is it's a complement. If you know any kind of C influenced language like C#, Java, if you're taking C# and Java, or if you're doing the other stuff this semester, are you guys taking Java at all this semester? So you're taking with the other professor, Professor Andre, right? With me? Oh, JE. Okay, what about you guys? You guys taking Java with JE? Okay, so that's good. So that means you'll be able to do, it's going to refresh you, because basically at the end of the day, Java is Java. You got that C influenced language, very similar syntax. And so the great thing is it's a complement. When you take JavaScript, then it's kind of very similar to C# and other C influenced languages. There are some differences, and it's very loosely typed. And the thing that people hate about JavaScript, the developers hate about it, is it's too loosely typed. It's not as structured. And it looks like spaghetti code sometimes, especially because there's everything goes, right? You have the flexibility to really hang yourself with JavaScript. And troubleshooting, debugging JavaScript can be really challenging. Okay, so how do we fix that? Well, there is a language, like I was talking about earlier, choice called TypeScript. And Microsoft supports TypeScript. This is their baby. They're the ones that have come up with it. What it does is it allows us to go closer to the newest standard of JavaScript called ECMAScript 6. Right? That's what it's pushing us towards, that standard. Now, why is this awesome? Why am I telling you about this? Why not just stick with JavaScript and do vanilla JavaScript projects? Because you know what? In the industry, that's what they're really looking for, people will say, right? But here's the great thing. You are doing JavaScript. It's just, like I said, syntactic sugar. So what is this TypeScript that I talk about anyway? Well, take a look at this, right? We're at JavaScript or TypeScript 1.5. They're moving to TypeScript 2. That's their goal. And if you're an AngularJS person, so it's like AngularJS and TypeScript, right? They kind of have this this idea of Google is AngularJS, right? They're the people that created AngularJS. Actually, it was in the news. I was hoping I could see this as a news article. But if I look at Angular, which is a front-end framework, this is non-game related, right? The great thing about this is it's made by Google. They're at version 1.45, and they're moving towards Angular 2, which is this really a responsive front-end framework that's going to be using TypeScript. So Microsoft, Google, getting together to program something is a good sign that TypeScript is going to hang out for a while. So it's not like I'm going to teach you something that's going to go bye-bye, right? Because I don't like that. Like, for example, CoffeeScript is an example of that. CoffeeScript is similar to TypeScript, so is Dart. So there's other languages that do the same thing, that convert from one set of syntax to another. TypeScript is a better fit for us in that it's going to last, I believe it's going to last a little longer. Now, hopefully AngularJS is going to speed up and produce Angular 2. Right now they're Angular 1.45. They're supposed to produce Angular 2 by early next year, and if that happens, then it'll be Angular with TypeScript. And that'll be huge for you guys to know that, because from an industry perspective, it's great to put on a resume, to know the full stack and all that stuff, right? So that's why I chose to do that with TypeScript. And also, it gives us a lot of power. When it comes to game programming, traditionally, young programmers like yourselves, like, if you have a problem, you can figure it out in your head. Because what are you going to figure out? An accounting program? Some kind of form that I'm going to ask you to do in a class? You can figure it out, and the plan for figuring that out is small. A game, and you'll notice that as well when we do Unity and other kind of games, so people are taking game programming 1. It's not something you can figure out in your head. You need a plan for the game. You need to script it out. You need to figure out what you're going to do. And it's like almost as if you're planning to do a much larger application, an enterprise level application, when you produce a game, right? Okay. So that's what TypeScript allows us to do. So take a look at this syntax. Stuff that you guys have seen before. It's not like something you couldn't have, or you can't understand. It's almost like readable. It's something that you can look at and go, yeah, I get that. I'm creating a class, a point class, and I've got my X and Y coordinates here. And here's something called a constructor, which is like, it's indicating this is what my constructor signature is like, right? And what I'm doing, I'm using this keyword to indicate that this X is equal to this X coming in. So this is a local variable X, and it's equal to the instance variable X. Now, this could have been written differently to make it even more readable, but this is pretty cool. And here's our method, getDist, right? JavaScript, not look like this. And I'll show you what I'm talking about in a bit, right? So this is what the TypeScript allows us to do. That's one part of it. TypeScript also has some really cool handbook of stuff that you can learn how to do everything in. So if you want to learn TypeScript right now, if you were to take this home and kind of step through this thing, it wouldn't take you long. If you know C influenced languages, you could pick up TypeScript in no time and understand how to do things like declare variables, establish arrays, the whole thing. So the actual language specification is right up here online. They have some really cool samples if you want to see what they can do with it. Obviously, they have a hello world, and they have the code sample. They do some ray tracing, a to-do app, all kinds of other stuff that they've got going on here with TypeScript. Okay, so that's really, really cool. TypeScript is also included in a couple of IDEs, and I kind of mentioned that earlier a little bit. One of them is, and this is the new one that's just kind of come out recently, is Visual Studio Code. And I would invite you to take a look at this. So the great thing is, now I'm looking at it on the Mac, but if you notice, it's Linux, Mac, or Windows, right? So it's like a Visual Studio Lite, right? And it reminds me a lot of something like a brackets. If you're used to programming brackets, or even something like a Sublime Text, if you're into that kind of thing, it's very similar to that in terms of its tone, right? When I'm using it. But it supports TypeScript native. In fact, it was written with TypeScript, which is a really cool thing. So if you wanted to use, if you're a Microsoft hater, you don't want to use Microsoft Visual Studio because you don't like it, right? And or your system can't run it because it's so crazy, it's 70 million lines of code. You can certainly do Visual Studio Code, still by Microsoft, but awesome. It would be awesome, and it would do everything you need to do. I'm going to use the more, heavier duty side of things. I'm using Visual Studio itself. And in order for me to do that here on the Mac, I've got to virtualize it here in Windows 10. Okay? And it's a weird, I got some weird display settings. Let me just fix my display settings here. Woohoo! What was that? Which one? What are you talking about? I don't know. I don't know what you're saying. I don't know. Anyways, that's Max's fault, right? I told you before. Max got me into that, and we did a bit of a LAN party last semester. Maybe we'll do it again this semester. Let's see how it goes. All right. Anyway, so but we have to do that kind of stuff because hey, you know, I am a game professor, right? So you gotta do that kind of stuff, and I got my kids into it and all that too. All right, let's go through this a little bit. So let's bring up Visual Studio 2015 so I can explain to you some of the piece parts that you need. You need Visual Studio 2013 or 2015, right? The other thing that you're going to need for you to be successful with this one, to have a consistent experience, is Visual Studio Web Essentials. And let me go and get that for you here so you see what I'm talking about. So Visual Studio Web Essentials, right? I can actually type it in. There you go. And one day, when things go well, then, yeah, there we go. Okay, so Visual Studio Web Essentials is a really cool suite of products made for Visual Studio, like the heavier duty Visual Studio. The reason why I'm tending to go towards Visual Studio is because you know Visual Studio. You've been using it for C#. We're probably going to use it a bit for Unity and all that kind of stuff as well. I don't want to give you too many more IDEs to learn because it's just another thing to learn in addition to TypeScript and blah, 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 and everything else. So that's why I'm choosing for Visual Studio, just from an ease of use and learning thing, right? Okay, so what does it do? Well, look, it has TypeScript support built in. And of course, what it does is it allows you to, once you install Visual Studio or Visual Studio Web Essentials, it kind of supports TypeScript in this kind of preview window and so on, right? Now, again, it works for Visual Studio 2012. I don't recommend it because there's some slight differences in 2012. Visual Studio 2013 and 2015. And it gives you some additional features, feature sets. You need Visual Studio 2013 with at least update 5, right? And TypeScript 1.5 in order for you to be up to speed with what I do. And that's what should be loaded in the machine in front of you, like the one that's on in the school machine, right? So let's test it now. And I don't know if you're going to use your laptop or the school machine, but you need that set up at the minimum in order for us to be on the same level. All right. The other thing is that we're going to be establishing some tests. Let's do some testing here for the very first get-go. I'm going to kind of do that with you guys with Visual Studio. So see if I can make this a little bit smaller here. And I apologize. I do have a bit of a weird resolution because of my Retina display and everything else, right? So let's see how this goes here. Here we go. And I'm hoping that it's being captured nicely on on YouTube. And so far, I'm not seeing my face, which is a good sign, right? Okay, so let's take a look at this. I want to make a new project. So I don't know if you guys are with me. Are you guys with me with Visual Studio yet or no? On the system in front of you? What do you mean it doesn't work? Here's up. Well, you guys okay with Visual Studio? You guys? Yes? That's a good question. What if I want to work from home using TeamViewer? Can I control my computer at home? Absolutely. Go ahead. You could. It's going to be slightly different than what I'm going to show you, though. So that's why I recommend if we do Visual Studio Code, then I'm going to show you some stuff, and it may not be exactly the same. Just letting you know. So, you know, with Visual Studio Code, what you need to do is I'm just going to launch it for a second so you understand. And since you're asking, I mean, I want to try and make you happy, right? So let's try this out. So if I launch Visual Studio Code, here it is on the Mac. As you'll notice, there's nothing going on, right? So I need a project for this to start off. So I'm going to go into new folder, and let's just call this thing, as an example, if I kind of type in here. Let's call this COMP397, and we'll call it Fall 2015. We'll put that Fall 2015 in all the time just to keep the same. And then we'll say Lesson 1, Part 1. So a big kind of folder name, okay? Doesn't matter. Well, if I take this and if I drag and drop it, typically in other courses, another kind of code, I can kind of drag and drop this and I'm in there, right? It doesn't work like that with Visual Studio Code. I have to open up a folder. This is one step that I hope they fix at some point, which will make them a little bit more competitive. But let's try this out. So I'm going to open up this thing. Now, if you notice, there's nothing in here. It's just this, right? This is my Visual Studio file. So in here, I've got to create everything from scratch. Let's do that. Right? So follow me with what I'm doing. If you're I'll do both Visual Studio Code and we'll do Visual Studio for those people who are doing the other side. I'm going to right click in here if I want to create a new file, right? So new file. And the first file, of course, has got to be an index.html file because that's the file that we need to get going with, right? Now with Visual Studio Code, I need to have some kind of structure for the HTML file. Now, I'm not sure if it supports Emmet. Let me see if it does. No, it does not. And I wonder if it has some kind of default framework. But I think if I just go HTML5, yeah, it doesn't support it at all. So let's go do this. Let's just start off. So we need a doc type. Let's just type the doc type declaration here. And the doc type is HTML, of course, just like normal, right? So there's my doc type. And then after the doc type, I need an HTML tag, right? And I need a closing tag for my HTML, right? There it is. And of course, I can't do anything without my head. So here's my head, right? And in my after the head, I need a body. So this is all the stuff that you need to put together from scratch anyway. So let's put a body tag together, and then so that's really it in a nutshell. I mean, you've got your structure for HTML. Now in the head, I'm going to have to put a title tag and some meta tags, right? In HTML, when I say HTML, I want to specify that language is equal to English for sure to keep HTML5 compliant, right? And I'm going to see, just give me a second here. I'm going to go into preferences, and I want to see if I can pull off some. I want to change my user settings so that it is. Now, if you notice, this is all done with what I'm doing here. Just change. I want to just change the size of my font here so that's not so small. So otherwise, it's going to be too small for you to see, and I don't want that. No, it's JavaScript configuration, CSS configuration. And I think the HTML5 configuration is up here. There it is. Control the font size. Let's see if I go font size 1. Allow me to modify it. We'll place your settings in this file here, right? We're going to have to explore that one. I wonder how they do that. That's a new thing for me. That's fine. But anyways, so I'm gonna go back to this a second. Maybe one of you guys can look it up. I'm okay with that. But in here, if you guys can bear with me, in the head of the document, we need a meta tag, and the meta tag has got to have a character set, right? So character set is equal to UTF-8. I think it's important for us to do that from an encoding perspective, right? And then the other thing we're going to need is another meta tag, right, with name is equal to viewport. Now watch I'm doing this all from scratch, right? And then content width is equal to device width, right? Sorry, and then initial scale, I forgot to put that in. Initial dash scale is equal to 1, right? So that's really in a nutshell. We're going to have to put that in there, right? So that's the first media tag. Did I miss something? So it's kind of hard to see. That looks correct. Okay, so that's really the meta tag, and then the title. I have to put that in there, and the title's got to be something like COMP397. We'll say demo for today, right? That's what it's going to be. And then inside that object, we're going to have to actually include some other files and folders, right? All right, so let's just save that. And that's kind of we're starting to structure it out. I could do it two ways here with Visual Studio Code. I could structure my internal folder structure manually, right? Here or here. And it'll pick up because it's watching, right? So let's go do the new thing. So I need a new folder for something I call content. And if you notice, Visual Studio Code updates my folder structure on this side as well. So I've got a content folder, which I'm going to have my CSS files in, right? And then I'm going to go a new folder, and inside that, I'm also going to have an assets folder. And it's very good to keep organized like this. And inside my assets folder, I'm just going to go in here, double click, and I'm going to put a couple new folders. One is to be called images, and another one is going to be called audio, and maybe yet another one, and I'm going fast, is going to be called fonts. So there's three three different folders within the folder. And if you notice on the left in Visual Studio Code, it shows you this exact same thing. It's watching. So from one to the other, I'm starting to build out my structure, right? Why did I do this now? Because when I load stuff on from in the head, I've got to have my file sorted out over here, right? So I can do it both ways. I can kind of do it from a file folder perspective, right? And by the way, it works exactly the same way on the Windows side. You can just do your file folders on one side and then do this stuff. You're going to see how fast it is on Visual Studio, how fast it is on regular Visual Studio. But you asked for it, so I'm giving it to you, right? So let's go with, so again, in the content file, so here in the content file, I'm going to right-click inside Visual Studio Code and press New File, right? And the file that I'm going to make is going to be called app, or game, sorry, game, because we're making a game, game.css, right? So my game.css file, really right now, it's got nothing inside of it. I'm going to save it, and I haven't really attached it to my index.html, but I will right now, right? So remember how we do that? We say link, right, with a link, and then we say rel is equal to style sheet, right? I'm not wrong. And then type, right, is equal to text or CSS, whatever, right? And then from there, we're going to say href, like all the stuff to remember, right? It's crazy for you guys. And this is where it kind of it's really cool. You can say, well, it's content, right? And then / game.css. And if it's a problem, it's gonna kind of complain. My content is with capital C, so this kind of works out okay, right? And again, there's an optional / that you can put in for this kind of stuff. If I've done it correctly, then this will work. All right, now if you notice, the code hinting I'm getting right now, minimal, right? It's a minimalist framework, like I said, right? So this is the thing that you have to kind of look at. If there's a problem, it'll come up there. That's a good thing. So far it looks like I'm okay. All right, so I've done this piece. I've done my game.css. Now, to play our games, we need a canvas element, and that's where everything sits. It sits inside of a, hey, oh my God, I can't believe it. Oh, we're together again, Lilia. Oh my God. So inside of our body tag, by the way, I'm recording everything, so worst case, you're good, right? Inside of our body tag, I have to put a canvas element in there. So canvas. Right? My canvas element is the main element that so my game lives in the canvas element. I'm using HTML5 canvas, right? Think about canvas as almost like my stage. This is where all my game is going to happen, right? So my canvas is the container that houses my game, and it runs within HTML5. So you can see the HTML5 we're going to use is minimal. CSS, minimal. Everything is going to be JavaScript at the end of the day, right? Now, if you're someone who, like Lilia, who's a JavaScript queen, right? She's like, she's a JavaScript, come on. She did Emerging Technologies 308 with her partners, and they did JavaScript, heavy-duty JavaScript too, with Mongo and everything else. So for you, it's going to be no problem. And for you guys, it's going to be no problem too. So one thing we need is an ID for the canvas, which we're going to name, this is an attribute we need to make it, I'm going to call it canvas, just to keep it simple. I also need a width element that tells me how wide is screen. Let's make it so it's 640 by 480. So we'll say width is 640. I know it's hard to see. And a height of 480, okay? There we go. So that's kind of now in the middle of the canvas element, normally you can put something in there, but it's empty. There's nothing. The canvas element is going to be used as a container object only. So that's one thing. All right, cool. So really here at the top of my code, I'm just going to put a comment in here. At the top of my code, really, this is the CSS section, right? And this, for people who have seen this before, it's nothing new, right? And then at the bottom of underneath in my body section, this is going to be my JavaScript section. So JavaScript here. Right? And the JavaScript section is what, now I'm putting it in the bottom of my code. Why am I putting it in the bottom of my code? Really, I know this answer, but why am I putting my JavaScript libraries in the bottom of my code? Why? No, because otherwise, if I put it in the top of my code, it's blocking, right? And the reason for that is it'll wait for it's synchronous. So it'll wait for my JavaScript to load and then load my page. I don't want that, right? I want my page to load, then load my JavaScript if there's anything else that needs to load. Okay, so I like to do that. I like to kind of put my JavaScript together, right? Okay, In order for me to kick off CreateJS and to make this all work, I need the libraries, right? To download the latest libraries for CreateJS, right? And this is what I need to do. And I need to do it manually here. I'm going to show it to you on the other side with Visual Studio again, and you can see how quick it is. But let's just do it since you're asking the question. Let's just do it, right? I don't have another, I need another folder that I don't have in here yet. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to right click, I'm going to go new folder, and I'm going to call this scripts. That's where all my JavaScript's going to live, right? In my scripts folder, I'm going to make a new folder, right? We're going to call it lib for library, right? So let's take a look at what I've got. You notice how it updates right away from a folder structure perspective. Okay? So it's all there. So really, my scripts is where I'm going to put everything. I need to get those things, my libraries. So let's do that. Let's get my libraries. Okay, so where do I get that? Well, I get it from here, from my CreateJS website. So I'm going to go back to my CreateJS website, and we're going to grab the libraries. Right, so I'm going to start with easel, right? And I'm going to download easel.js, right? And again, there's different ways of doing it. You can use the CDN, right? Which is the Content Delivery Network. In some ways, if you're going to do a production game, that's the way to go, if you're going to go into production. From a local development perspective, it's a little easier sometimes to do it locally, to actually have the files we can handle together, right? So that's why I recommend we put those files and folders together. So here's how you do it. You go to download easel.js first. It's going to give you a zip file right now. I'm going to put it somewhere we can find it again, so we don't have to do this again and again. I'm going to go into my courses. Bear with me. Into 397, right? And I'm going to create a library section. So we can do this one time. There's my libraries. And here's my easel.js. I'm just going to download them all for now. So here's easel. Here's tween. Here's sound. And here's preload. Okay, so those are all the libraries. Now I've got to unpack those libraries for a second. So let's just do that. So again, I'm in my open up another file thing for a second. Here we go. And what I want to do here is, just so I can see the libraries, that's why I opened this one up. Again, in Windows, it's very similar. I'm just using Mac OS, but it doesn't really matter. So here's my libraries. I want to unzip these, right? So let's do the first one. So here's easel, and then there's preload. I'm just unzipping it. Bit of work, right? And that's what this class is all about, a little bit of setup, right, for us. And one more is tween. Whew. Okay, lots of work. Done. Now let's get those in my scripts folder. I want to put my libraries in there, right? Because that's where I want to point everything. Now those libraries, they live in the lib folder already, right? Now if you notice, under easel.js, I have a bunch of libraries. I have easel.js 0.8.1. That's the latest version of it. I need the .min.js file. That's the one I want. So easel.js -0.8.1.min.js. That's the one I want. I'm going to drag this in or copy this. I'm not going to drag it. I'm going to copy this in to my library file here. So here it is. Easel.js.min. Now what I'm going to do to make it easier for you guys, if you wait, right, and watch for a second, I'm going to pop this up on GitHub so you guys can see this stuff and download it, and you'll be able to speak with me in 2 seconds, right? As opposed to you trying to catch up. There's just no way. I'm going to be faster than you because I know where to get to. Even if I was to slow down, I'm still going to have to, you're going to be a little bit behind. So bear with me. So I need the libraries. Again, you can use the recording here as a reference if you want to do it on your own, right? You probably will never have to do it after today, though. There's a reason for that. Okay, so that's one. I need to get the other libraries. Sorry, I forgot those ones. I need the preload.js library. So here's my library, and it's preload. Same idea. I'm going to pop that over there. But on the Mac, I want to copy and paste instead of drag and drop because it'll move it. Right? There we go. And same thing with sound.js, my library. Now, sound, there's a bit of some some changes with the sound. All I need really is this one. I'm going to copy this one here and move it over. This is the entire suite of products. And one more. And TweenJS. We won't be using TweenJS so much in this course, only because we're not going to do strict animation with Canvas too much. We'll be doing some of it, but the majority we'll be working with is with easel, preload, and sound. All right, as you'll see. Okay, so good. So we got all these libraries. Now I can include them, right, inside my file structure. Okay. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code, and as you can see, I have my scripts and I have my libraries. Now in Visual Studio, the great thing is I can just drag and drop. I just do one of these, right? Drag and drop this, kind of into my files. Visual Studio Code, no such luck, right? It's not going to happen. Let's go back to it. So I need to type it all out, and that's the challenge that I'm going to have, right? As you can see, the process is slow, right? The good thing is I already have a really cool, I'm showing you so that, and I'm not trying to discourage you, all right? I'm just showing you that there's a bit of a process involved in doing what we're supposed to do. Let me go just pop over to the Visual Studio side, and this is what I recommend for you guys. That's why I'm recommending it's easier. I've got this CreateJS boilerplate that I want you guys to download, right? Not to waste your time, from GitHub. So if you guys go to my GitHub account, and by the way, we're going to be using GitHub a lot extensively in this one. So let's go to GitHub, and I'm going to sign into my user account here. Under, let's see if I can get to this Centennial College stuff. Under Centennial College, there's going to be I've got some repositories, and one of them is this COMP397 CreateJS boilerplate, right? So the link is github.com/C Centennial C College, all in one. So go there. So I've changed things around to make it even easier than before, instead of using my name. Forget my name. Just go to Centennial College, right? And let me know when you're there, and you'll see this is a GitHub link. By the way, that's what I'm going to do for Java and everything else. Put it up, I'll pop it up there. Okay, so this is cool. This CreateJS boilerplate is what I want you guys to look at, right? And this is all the stuff you need to get going. So instead of doing all the work I just did, like copying the files, moving on, this is just a framework for getting everything done. And I'll explain it all in a second. So again, you can download, you can zip it, download in the zip file, or you can clone to your desktop if you have the GitHub client, which you can download from GitHub, right? I highly recommend, if you don't have a GitHub account, to sign up, right? Because we're going to be using that extensively through the course. GitHub account is free. And they also have a GitHub account for students that gives you, I think, a few private repos and all kinds of stuff as part of your DreamSpark account. I'm not sure if you know that. Let me go to that for a second as well. So I'll go to your Centennial DreamSpark account. I wonder if it's somewhere down here. It is. All right, so there's DreamSpark. You can get that by going to dreamspark.com/student/software catalog ASPX. And if you notice down here, it includes some really cool stuff. Again, a little bit different than when we were together. It includes a subscription to Azure, right? Which is kind of free. If you want to download it and you verify your email address as a student, you can get a subscription to Microsoft Azure, the cloud platform service, right? It includes, which I like a lot, GitHub Student Developer Pack, right? This is really cool, guys, like really solid. It's a great set of tools. It says it kind of includes all kinds of additional free repos and an SSL certificate, your own domain, a free domain name, like all kinds of stuff that you can get right from DreamSpark, right? So to me, this is the way to go. Like, I mean, if I was a student, I would go and do this GitHub pack, available to use too still. This is really great. We didn't have this before, and finally they gave it to us. This is something that we wanted for a while. So this is something cool. if you can't access this thing, it's not that difficult. Again, you go to dreamspark.com/product, and you'll find it. And again, it's here on the video, so you can always find it later on if I'm rushing too much. But if you're like me, I'm not a student, I'm a professor, so I got to do it the hard way sometimes, and I got to kind of put together my own GitHub. Right? But so again, you download this thing. You can download the zip file, and when you do, right, it would look like this. You launch in Visual Studio, and if you've got your Visual Studio up to date, I'm not sure if is your Visual Studio not working there completely? All right, now, was that? It won't boot up at all. How about yours? Are you using your Visual Studio over there? And yours in the corner? What's your name again? Robert. So yours is working. So everyone else is working. If you download and install, you're using TeamViewer, so you're going to work. If you download and install this file, and just make it a little smaller for you guys so you can see, then what you get is everything that I was doing before and then some. So you get my entire library of stuff. You know, that kind of includes a little stub, a little template file that has all the libraries that I was talking about. So here's all your libraries, and I also include some stats to count, a stats counter to count how many frames per second your game is working on as well. But really, at the end of the day, it's exactly what we were putting together. Here, just like, let me make this a little bigger so you can see it. Right? So you get all this from the CreateJS boilerplate file that I'm giving you from GitHub. Right? So I don't know, Lily, if you can see it. Just checking. Did you find it? Still downloading? It's pretty big? No, can't be that big. What was that? Oh, you just started. Yeah, it's okay. So let me explain some of the stuff that's going on here. So, because you've seen it all the other stuff. I've actually included Bootstrap as well, because I bootstrap my particular boilerplate as well, right? But if I was going to go with what I was doing, I have to use my script tags if I was going to do it in Visual Studio Code to kind of build out my game. Or I can download the boilerplate code here and build it from there with Visual Studio Code. If you still want to use Visual Studio Code, which is cross-platform now, again, like I said before, you can use it for Mac, Linux, and Windows. It's not Visual Studio. It's a lighter version of Visual Studio that you can use that just come out recently, right? Okay, so this is the index file, and this is, think about this as what links everything together, right, for us, right? So when we do game development, I don't want you guys to start necessarily from scratch. Why would I make you do this over and over again? So it's kind of a waste of time. I mean, it's great from a learning perspective. If you want to learn HTML5, if you've never done HTML5 before, then yeah, okay, you learn how to put your files together and over again. But at the end of the day, this is not a beginner course, right? So so the JavaScript libraries that are here are the ones that I've included in the pack. And if I look at the Solution Explorer window in Visual Studio, yes? We're going to have to fix that. Right? Let's check this out. So if that's true, the great thing is I can go into Team Explorer. Thank you for that. I'm going to go to Team Explorer Changes, and I do have some untracked files. Thank you very much for that. There it is. I will add all these files in and say updated boilerplate file, boilerplate. And I'm going to go to Home, and I'm going to unsync minutes and sync. Give me a second. Check it now. You have to re-download. Yep. And now GitHub should be updated with the latest version. Sorry about that. I didn't realize that happened. Hey, so what do I do when I have this boilerplate? Because I don't want to corrupt this thing over and over again. I just wanted to show you what it is, right? I'll bring it up in a second when you guys are ready. Let me know when you're ready. See if you can download this thing for me. Without the index.html, really, it's a lot of problem. What the hell? What's the? You want me to do that for you? Yes. The only thing is we're not going to include Bootstrap or jQuery or stats right now. We're just going to do these, right? And then we need to include a new file on Visual Studio Code. Just going to go back there just to follow so you can keep up. One thing we do need to include in the library, which is new for us, would be I'm going to right-click and put a new file. It's got to be game dot TS file. And this is where it gets a little crazy. So I go game.ts, and when I do that, it realizes it's a TypeScript file. See on the bottom here? Game.ts, right? It detects that it's a TypeScript file on the Visual Studio Code side, right? And this is where I would start including things in there, right? So on back to index.html, we never include the TS. TS is TypeScript. TS doesn't get compiled by the browser. It needs to be the JS version. What happens is, even though TS, I've made a TS file that's inside your library, when you save it and reload it, it becomes, there's a counterpart to it, if you notice, that's going to be JavaScript. You can't see it here, but it will be when I'm finished with it. For now, though, let's put a pause on this one and go back to the other side for a second so I can explain stuff. All right, so I've got my game.js file. I've got my libraries in here, and let's take a look at my game.js file because this is where all the fun happens. So my game.js file should be under scripts. If you've downloaded the GitHub file, and by the way, you can use the GitHub file with Visual Studio Code as well, right? If you notice, I've got a bunch of different things here. I've got my core library where I've got my game.ts file in here. I've got my library files where I have my easel.js, my preload, my sound, my stats, my tween, all that stuff is there, right? I have something else called typings. And typings, what they do is, in order for you to use TypeScript, TypeScript has a group of libraries. And we're going to go through this slower. Again, this is an intro today, right? So I'm showing you how it works, and then we're going to go and kind of like, decouple everything and step by step to build this whole thing like I'm doing. I'm just doing it really quickly today because I was asked. Otherwise, I would have gone in a different direction. But if you notice this, as an example, I've got all my files here, and then if I was to double click on my core library, which is game.ts, and let me just make this a little smaller for you so you can see it. I create reference paths for all my typings for TypeScript, and then what I can do is I start defining my my variables. So this is a very high level. So take a look at this. So in JavaScript, now this is JavaScript, I have to define my variable canvas. I don't have to give it a type. TypeScript allows me to indicate that there's a type. Why would I make my life so difficult and indicate that there's a type if I can be flexible with JavaScript? Because TypeScript allows us to get really cool tooling and support. Debugging with TypeScript is like awesome, right? If you're going to do this whole project with JavaScript, good luck. Right? It's really hard to debug JavaScript without some kind of strict mode on. And this is what this does. This is almost like having strict mode on from the very get-go. All right. So I've got these typings. So canvas is an HTML element is what I'm saying. Stage is of type CreateJS stage. If I get this CreateJS stage, I know that I'm connected to the CreateJS framework if I don't get an error like this. Stats is a stats file, right? And then what I do is I have a little manifest, a little asset manifest that I created that points to where my assets are. And I have a couple of assets, a start button, and a yay sound. Okay, that's what this thing does. So very high level. Just watch and learn for a second, okay? I got a couple of global game variables that I use. A hello label, right? So where I'm going to say my hello world, and my start button, right? Where I can actually, I can use my start button to actually, press the button to say yay. I've got a preload function that I've built, right? And the preload functions in JavaScript work like methods in C# or Java, right? Except there is no basic class. You can run a JavaScript function procedurally without having it object-oriented in whatsoever, right? So here I'm accessing preload when I have an event that fires when my page loads, and when my page loads, I'm indicating I want to load the preload function. That's what's happening here. So my index.html fires up, bam, it loads my preload function, which is in here. This is what's loaded. So then it follows the same browser. The browser starts loading this in. It says my assets is of a new asset. I'm going to install a new plugin which is compatible with my sound. On asset load, what I'm going to do is when it's completely loaded, I'm going to go into and load up my init function right here. That's what this is going to do. All right. And then after my init function is loaded, I load up my canvas, I define my stage, and so on. I set my frame rate to 60 frames per second. This is where I do it right here. I listen for frame ticks, or every frame, right? That's what I'm doing. And I do that. I refresh my stage every frame, which is 60 times per second, here on my game loop, right? So it looks complicated, right? But I want you to show when I build this out with you, and we're going to build it out step by step. That's what I was going to do with you, right? And I'm going to do that on Visual Studio Code just because you challenged me to do so today. What the hell, right? Let's see what I get. So this is what we're aspiring to get. So I'm running this thing locally, and I get this, right? And if I click the button, so I get if I hover over the button, I get this, kind of hover effect. I can see here that I'm getting 60 frames per second, right? When I click the button,
yay,
I get a yay sound, right? It's pretty straightforward.
Yay.
Yeah. You should be able to do that too. It almost sounds like a moo, ooh, right? That's all it really is. Now you might say, wow, that's a lot of bloody work for a yay sound, right? But the great thing is I've established a couple things here with this whole project. One, I'm using HTML5 canvas, right? That's what I'm doing. And what I'm doing is I'm activating HTML5 audio with this thing, right? And I've got a piece of text that I've kind of put in the middle of my screen that's saying hello world, right? With a button effect that's in here as well. And it's all being preloaded, right? So I've got a preloader that's taking care of all that, okay? So this is pretty damn good for very quick. And this is where we're going to start. We're going to start with our boilerplate. But I want to build the boilerplate with you, right? Because otherwise you won't understand all the stuff that I just did, right? And in order for me to do that, I got to go step by step. So this is the overview that I'm going to go. When we come back from break, let's take 10. So I know you guys are glazing. You guys just finished your crazy game. I'm going to go back to Visual Studio Code, and we're going to connect it just like we're doing here, step by step, right? Without any kind of fancy stuff. And I'll show you how we put the piece parts together and build this thing up. And I'll share this stuff with you on GitHub in a new file called COMP397 demo, right? Where we kind of build up our demo file for TypeScript and CreateJS. Because right now on the Visual Studio Code side, we don't have much, right? So we're going to build this up. This is where we're going to start off, and I'm going to create a little GitHub repo for us to follow along. Okay, so people who came in late, then they can follow along with us too. All right. So let's pause the movie right now. Take a 10-minute break. Come back. We'll do the next piece. All right.